we understood that small businesses were hurting, and we helped them, and it didn't go to the Supreme Court to challenge it. All of a sudden, when it's about our students, they challenge it. That is not right. That is not fair. And that is what we are fighting as well when we say cancel student debt.
All right, I think Randy Weingarten was upset about this challenge in the Supreme Court to the president's plan to forgive upwards of $400 billion worth of student loan to the tune of up to maybe $20,000 each. The High Court is sort of weighing that right now. We thought we'd seek out a favorite student of ours, not only because she's very, very smart and gets great grades, that's a given, but she has concerns about where this could lead. I'm talking about Kavya Nivarthy, a student at Dartmouth, the Dartmouth opinion writer. Kavya, good to have you back. How you doing?
Thanks so much for having me back, Neil.
Let's talk a little bit about this and how you feel. You know, obviously, Randy Weingarten is saying that this is help that a lot of these students need. They piled up a lot of debt. They could use the help from the government, from us. What do you think?
Right. Well, you know, yesterday for the first time, the Supreme Court heard two really interesting cases that are challenging the Biden administration's plan on student loan forgiveness. And I think, you know, what we heard yesterday was the Supreme Court consider two key questions, right? The first is the question of fairness, which is one that I brought up when I first voiced my opposition to these sort of broad student loan forgiveness plans. The second question I think the Supreme Court considered yesterday is of scope. Right? Is it within the Biden administration's executive powers to implement such a plan?
Do you think it is? Do you think it is?
Right. So, you know, from a legal perspective, you know, the Biden administration is invoking this 2003 HEROES Act, which seems to suggest some very narrow conditions, right? The language of that act is national emergency, you know, folks in connection with a military operation. And so there's a really interesting legal conversation there. The other interesting back and forth I think we heard yesterday was between Justice Alito and Solicitor General Preligar, which is on this question of the major questions doctrine, which essentially says that questions of such broad economic and political significance really should be left to Congress and the courts to decide. And that's something that I agree on, right? Like you said, this is $400 billion of federal aid being allocated to the program. I think on fairness grounds, there's a lot of scrutiny that needs to be applied to this, as I argued last time, in terms of this being a regressive policy. And so, yeah, I think this on those two grounds, scope and fairness, there's a lot of scrutiny that needs to be applied to this.
If the justices end up surprising us and later this summer we find out that they support what the president wants to do, which seems unlikely, the initial reading just from their questioning, what do you fear happens?
Well, in that case, Neil, I think this is a situation that Congress needs to take action on, right? One of the topics touched on in yesterday's oral arguments was inaction from the legislative branch. This has become an issue of, you know, real national importance. And, you know, I think more attention needs to be drawn to what are the trade-offs in this policy and who are the winners and losers. In my opinion, you know, those who are bearing the burden of paying for this plan and who are kind of getting the losing end of this plan are Americans who, A, have saved and sacrificed and repaid their loans, and B, Americans who never took out loans to begin with, which, to be clear, is the vast majority of Americans, right? It's less than 1/5 of Americans who even take out student loans to begin with.
Interesting. We'll follow it closely, Kavya, as I'm sure you will. Thank you very much. Good seeing you again.